Welcome to the second in our three-part Virtual Excursions training program. My name's Jackie Randalls and I've coordinated this program for national delivery as part of my role managing Inspiring Australia in New South Wales. For those new to Inspiring Australia, it's the national strategy for public engagement with STEM. We work with hundreds of community partners to connect scientific researchers to big audiences. And today's training is all about doing just that in the virtual world. It will be produced and delivered by Fizzics Education, Sydney Science Education and Refraction Media. And I'd like to acknowledge support from the New South Wales Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer and Inspiring Australia's state programs in New South Wales, the ACT, Queensland, Western Australia and South Australia. It's our hope that with the skills you'll learn in this course, you'll be well equipped to deliver exciting online programs for National Science Week in August and at other times of the year. Do connect with the IA program in your state. Your state manager is listed on the contact page of the National Science Week website, where we encourage you to log your events as they're organised. Enjoy the training and please let us know how useful it is by completing the evaluation survey that will be sent to you after each session. Many thanks, and I'll now hand over to Ben Newson from Fizzics Education.
Yes, welcome again. Welcome to those people who haven't been in this training session yet. Hi, my name's Ben Newson from Fizzics Education, and this session this afternoon is all about really how you can look at your online STEM festivals, whether you're designing them now or whether you're putting together for the future, how to get the most out of it and how to engage your audiences. Now, speaking of which, you can be engaged in this session completely. So you'll notice that there'll be a chat. Feel free to start introducing yourself, where you're from, and you're welcome to write a little bit about yourself if you'd like. But just do know, if you want to communicate to any of the presenters throughout this, use the question and answer function. Now, it does look different depending on which device you're on, but generally it's down the bottom. It'll say Q&A. Pop your question in there, or even a comment if you'd like, and we will, with our team, certainly get to your questions either typed or certainly answered live in the session so we can help you out. Now, there is quite a bit to get through in this 90 minutes. So there are a lot of people involved. So there's Fizzics Education. Fizzics Education has a number of moderators helping out. We have Jackie Cow, we have Stephanie Ruiz. Fizzics Education is a science education company that does science outreach and also distance learning. We also have Karen Player from Sydney Science Education, who has a bucket load of experience when it comes to virtual excursions. We have Heather Catchpole from Refraction Media, who's doing a stellar job with a team creating a lot of the content that you get to access after this, all the published content, but is also going to be working with Bridget Murphy from ANSTO, the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation. My words. And we also have Gary Westmore from ACME, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image down in Melbourne. So we have a lot of people to cover a whole bunch of different things. It's not just one topic, there are many, and we'll introduce what each topic is about as we go through. In fact, I might throw to Karen about that soon enough. However, I also want to acknowledge you are involved. And no matter where you are, there's a highly diverse landscape. There's a lot of people right across the country. And I want to acknowledge all the traditional custodians of your lands, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. We really want to acknowledge our elders, past, present, and emerging right across the country. And I also just wanted to pay respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might be joining us. And totally, this is going to be a great session. So, just let a bit of heads up too, sometimes people put their hands up, they'll raise their hands because that's a feature in a webinar. It's not so useful in this session. Ignore the raising hands part, just put a Q&A straight to our moderators and we'll certainly be able to help you out. Now, there are some sort of sections that we want to cover. I'm going to look at what it's like trying to deal with a large number of people and how to make it interactive. And then we'll have a chat with Karen Player from Sydney Science Education. She'll look at what it's like when you're trying to make interactivity happen when there's a smaller group and how that might work. We will then after that go to Bridget Murphy and Heather Catchpole to talk about the virtual reality programs and how that sort of impacted for doing online STEM engagement with ANSTO. We'll have a little bit of a break because we've got a bit of a chance to do some interactivity after this, whereby, guess what? We're doing a STEM thing. You're going to have to do some experiments with us and sort of see and measure for yourself what you think works and what doesn't, and we can comment in that in the chat the whole way through. We'll then have a chat with Gary Westmore from ACME, find out what they've been getting up to, and there'll also be a bit of a Q&A throughout. So knowing that that's all happening, I'm going to have a bit of a chat about how we deal with large groups here at Fizzics. We've been doing this for about 10 years, lots of different programming via virtual, whether it was Zoom or a Skype or a Google Meet, Teams, and all the rest of all these things around. There are lots of ways of engaging, and every platform is a little different. Now, one thing that really matters though is throwing up polls, and I won't do this for my section, but we'll probably have polls later on. Polls are very handy because they allows you to then, if you've got, in this case, we have 130 odd people involved in this webinar. If I want to get a bit of an idea of what people are thinking all in one go, I could launch a poll. You guys could answer the poll, and then I could display the results so you can see what I saw, and we can then comment about it. I mean, that's a very handy thing to do. Another thing is simply group chat. Now, I want you to look at the group chat wherever device you're currently on. Currently, it's chilled out. It's currently stopped. Now, sometimes if you say, I want everyone to say their favorite color. Just imagine you said something silly like that in front of 100 people. You watch just how fast everyone writes their colors so quickly into it. Oh, look at that. Look at them all go. Thanks for everyone for playing along, by the way. Now, I know in the recording I have a spotlighted video. You can't see the chat, but seriously, it's humming. It's going so quickly. Someone's got quite dark there. But the thing is, if you use group chat, the chat can get out of hand. It's very handy, especially if people are doing commenting, but there is actually an issue with the group chat. Think about a child protection point of view. A lot of you are going to be planning your online events whereby you don't know truly the age group who's going to be attending, the public attendees. Think about whether you want the ability for the attendees to be able to post links or not. You can actually turn these on or off depending on which platform you're using. Those links may be simple, hey, look at what I've got up to, here's an article I wrote or something. But what can happen though is what if that link goes to something you never want everyone to ever see because there's seriously bad things to share. No matter what we're talking about, think about child protection as I go through these different ways of engaging the public, because child protection seriously matters. So public chat has a double-edged sword because people can share things. Technically, yes, you can kick someone out if they say something wrong, but it's still got put there. Now, that's why we actually use moderators. That's why we have, in a public chat, we have, we're an adult audience right now, but having a moderation team in behind the scenes, they're able to work with you to either answer questions quickly and share links, or throw to any one of our panelists throughout, and that means that you have the the ability to have your question answered like in any other public forum. But at least you get to vet those questions if they're coming from a source that you probably don't want. Now, by the way, part of the team that one of the moderation team does is, and we have already set this up. I mean, I've got this sitting on this phone here, a free chat function. Now, there are lots of chat platforms around. We currently are using Slack, S-L-A-C-K. I know about other ones. There's Zoho Click, and there's other ones as well. But the idea is that, yes, we can have the chat happening. Oh, thanks for putting that into the chat there. We can have a chat. I can type into our chat right now. Hi, my name's Ben from Fizzics. How are you doing? But maybe I might want to talk to my panelists only. But here's the problem with this, is it's only a slight change. I actually right now, if I click on this, I can now change it to all panelists and attendees because I'm currently using Zoom. But what if I thought I was typing only to the panelists? And I'm like going, Karen, you're up in 3 minutes. That would be a bit awkwardly odd to put into the chat because it's now in a public forum. Think about where your chat is going in behind your attendees. So have Slack available. Now, it does seem like I'm rambling a little bit, but the reason why is there's lots of different little points that you can consider when you're doing large-scale webinars and how to make things interactive. I'm aware of other platforms. For example, Padlet is a platform where people have used before, where they'll have a series of columns where people can add their own thoughts for people to consume later, to look at later, or during the conference. But again, though, that allows people to put their own ideas into those spaces, and unless you curate what those messages are, could cause some dramas. Now, one thing that comes up, because I am covering a lot of different ones in the group side of things, are live streams. Now, I know there's quite a few people in this session that have already done a number of live stream sessions. That's when like you've got a camera and a microphone, it's pointing at you or several of you doing a thing, and it's going out into Facebook or YouTube or any number of all those different places. You know, maybe you do Twitch, I don't know. That live stream is very handy and can reach a broad audience, but with broad audiences comes a problem. Things go down, and when you have large numbers of people, there's a lot of people then contacting your help desk to work out what's gone wrong. So if you have a help desk, it can be done via a public chat, maybe on your page. You could actually embed a chat function onto your web page. You could have a help desk number, but think about how many people might contact that help desk number. If your live stream goes down, I don't know if you have done live streaming much, but you tend to have this thing called a stream key, which is just a URL, a website link that allows your software to talk to YouTube or your software to talk to Zoom. And what that means is that that's all fine, but if it goes down, you may not have a backup. But it turns out a lot of these platforms give you a backup stream key. So please use it. If you're deciding to do live streaming, have that backup stream key ready to go, or even better, if the software that you're using that does the streaming in the first place allows you to plug in a stream key, that would be a good thing to have there as a backup so you're ready to go. Now, there are ways of doing lots of, what could I do to engage my audience? Throwing to different cameras does help. We did talk about this in Web Conferencing Essentials 101 the week ago, but just briefly, I'm going to quickly just change this here. Yes, talking to another camera is handy. The problem is that if you're looking at the camera and you're now looking at the wrong one, now they're going to look at the side of your head and you can get lost, especially if you've got multiple cameras. Now, one thing I do want to show is if I go over here, and I know you get dizzy. So we did this in the last session. People asked, how do I do this? I know it's a bit blurry, but yes, you can have third-party devices to your computer. So in this case, I'm going to go back to my face because it's odd to be looking at the side of my face. I'm going to be sharing it's not a dandelion. This is your farmer's friend, Biden's Pelosa. Why have I chosen this? Frankly, it was out in the car park about 5 minutes before the session, so I went and grabbed it. But at least we can have a look at it in detail using our USB microscope. Have a think about your devices that you might have in your world. I mean, I'm just putting this up here. There we go. See that little hooks? Those little hooks there are the reason that the farmer's friend actually catch on your socks in the first place and cause a bit of drama. But more importantly, we're just showing you that yes, you can share different camera views and allow it to for a bit of interactivity to show some interesting stuff. Now I might quickly throw to Karen because what I'm going to do is during whilst Karen has a chat, I'm going to set up another thing to show on a share screen, which we can show from an audio point of view and prove that remote audiences can interact with your audio. But I'll go share this up and show it soon. But Karen, is there anything you'd like to share from engaging audiences from a small point of view?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. So my name's Karen from Sydney Science Education, and for those of you who joined us for Web Conferencing 101, I talked a lot about what you can do with your room and your space, and today I'm going to focus a little bit on how we can use that space for engagement. So unlike Ben, I don't have multiple cameras here, but I do have a camera that I've got preset. So I've set different camera angles into my camera. It gives me 3. So I'm able to move around the room. Now, I do a lot of sort of environmental education programs, a lot about sustainability. So I do have some live resources that I use here. So if I then can zoom in, I can change the dynamic of my presentation, turn my frog back around. And then with any audience, I can talk about the features of the frog. I can feed the frog. We can have a look at its body parts. We can have a look at its feet. I can do this with anything. So if I switch this across, I would have this prearranged. We can then have a look at an embedded cicada. And again, we can talk about the features. How about you all? You can either put it in the chat or you can all just yell at your screen like I get most people to do. How many legs does a cicada have? remembering a cicada is an insect. Excellent. And we're seeing that come through the chat. Or if for the sessions that I usually run are smaller, I will get the students to unmute their audio, or the presenters. So Ben was talking about how you can have that engagement with a really large group, and having those back channels and moderators and chats and Q&A are great. But if I've got less than 30 participants, I would easily have a Zoom session, and I can either have everyone with their video on, as long as I've got my child protection and safety mechanisms in place, or it may be that people still have their video off, but I can get them to turn their audio on at different times. So if I wanted everyone to answer something at once, I can simply say, okay, guys, everyone turn your microphones on and call out the answer to the question. And then there's a little bit of a delay, so you need to wait for those responses to come back in. There's also opportunities to do things with actions as well. So I do a lot about teeth and eating and chewing, and I talk about the muscle attachments. So I get the kids, now I'd like everyone to do this with me, to put your hands on the side of your head here and just move your lower jaw. So up and down, side to side, and you should be able to feel on the side of your head here, your muscles moving. And that's, you're linking to your lower jaw up to your head. So it's just a really simple way that I can get people to interact, keep moving, and do something that's a little bit different and engaging, and something they may not have done before. I've been doing lots of sessions in the last couple of weeks about teeth. So even just getting the kids to, or the adults, to put their fingers in their mouth and feel the different types of their teeth, or use their tongue to feel their teeth. So some really simple techniques that you can use for a big variety of topics to keep that engagement going. Certainly, I love the idea that I've got people yelling out at the screen at the other end, all sorts of different answers. And if I can have their audio on so I can hear and I can pick up those answers, and it helps me go, oh, actually, people didn't know the answer to that. I thought they would. I better change the way that my information's being presented and give something a little bit easier. So there are lots of different techniques that can help when you're in that smaller session. It may be that you want to do a forum with a group of community members. You may also want to do family engagement programs where, you know, getting the kids up to move and engage with their parents, getting them to go out on a treasure hunt and find things in their house or their backyard and come back and then show you on the screen. All of these things are ways that you can make engaging online learning programs in that smaller group sessions. And remembering some of the things that work for the big webinars and live streams can also work for your small sessions as well, and vice versa. You know, getting 200 people yelling at the screen, or 150 people feeling the muscles on their, attaching on their skull, is a great, simple way of doing engagement. So Ben, I'll throw back to you and let's see what you've got going with your cameras.
No worries. So one of the things I want to just highlight before I mess around with cameras is, honestly, once you're doing this for a while, this just becomes almost a game, just fun. And the idea of having multiple people watching you do your thing starts to dissolve away once you get comfortable with, honestly, failure, stuff going wrong. And in fact, and let me just put that right there at the start here. It's not quite the start, but if something goes down here, the world doesn't end. It's okay. People can always relink back into your session with the link that you've got. The only thing that I do know that does happen is if you've locked the room, there are certain web conferencing platforms that once you lock the room, if you kick someone out or it falls out, it's really hard to get back in. So some of them can be almost bordering on impossible. So maybe do a check on that first, so that and think very carefully about who you might kick out, because they might not be able to get in, just in case. But here's the thing, I do want to show you an engagement thing. Sharing screens is not just a matter of sharing your PowerPoint. Now, we love a PowerPoint or whatever you like to do your presentations on, but there are so many apps that you can use. You could link your preferred Android device or iPad or whatever, and you could link to your web conferencing system and share the apps that are happening. Or you simply can just go on the web and find stuff that's available. So I'm just going to do a quick thing on sound, and I might even just throw out there, I mean, partly unplanned in some ways, but if I go over here and I say share screen, so I'm looking down the bottom, looking for my share screen, I'm going to choose screen 2 to share, and currently you can see my not quite dulcet tones, but at least you can see my voice. And I can see Jackie's got an instrument here which might be a little bit fun to play with here. So Jackie Cow, who's one of our moderators, who's down in Melbourne, I'm up in Sydney, you all can see my voice turning up on this oscilloscope. If I mute my audio, and we actually, I might actually leave it open. Actually, we'll see the difference between muting and not. And I might get Jackie to unmute you, or just, how about this? We'll play a game. How about you in the chat work out what is Jackie using, and you can listen to it, and you can look at this, the wavelength. So I'm just going to go for it, Jackie. Go for it. Now, I kind of feel it's almost unfair, but mind you, we're trying to show that this is a valid way of going for it. That's a whirly tube ghost for sure. Those people watching the recording right now, I'm reading the chat. A spring. Ooh, interesting. Pipe, PVC tube. Trained elephant. I'm just going up the chat. Elephant tube, very, very close. You know what? We might play that game. I might stop sharing, and I might go to Jackie. Do you want to give it away what you did?
Yep. So I might just spotlight myself for a second so you guys can see. I have a balloon with a nut inside. And when I swirl the balloon around in circles, it makes a cool buzzing noise. We call this the balloon nut hummer experiment. Back to you, Ben.
That's it. Now think about this. You 100% can do whatever audio thing that you want via web conference. There is a true delay though. I'm going to go back to my share because I just have to think about this. Imagine that you are connecting from WA to Victoria, and your session, it's pretty hard to pick that there's something going on with you. It looks like the same sounds are happening. Now, how about this time, because I'm in Sydney, and I know, Jackie, I'm picking on you. Jackie, can I get you to unmute and simply clap your hands? Do it again.
Can you hear the clap?
Yep.
Might try using a different microphone.
And that works. Now that actually shows two things. Having different microphones to the device makes a huge difference. You'll notice that it was quite short in the wavelength. So having something quite loud near a microphone matters. But what if she wasn't in Melbourne? What if she was in New York? Now I'll stop sharing the wavelength of my voice. I did a session once, it was like 5 in the morning or something, and there were kids in New York, and we could actually work out what's called audio jitter, like how long it took for the signal to get to me by magic of the interwebs. Honestly, we were looking at nearly a second of delay for it to finally mess with my oscilloscope on screen, and the kids picked it. They realized what was going on. So you can play with this. I've actually heard of people doing almost like choir with multiple people, creating this weird sort of echoey sound. So you can mess around with it. Like anyway, so the idea of this playing around is to show that there are engagement tools. Now here's the thing, just for brevity, we will put a lot of this into the notes that will go out, that will get emailed out, after this, once we get it all pulled together and published and sent out to you. And you'll be able to see this all in more detail. But I might actually just see, then there might have been some questions and answers that have come up throughout this session. So, Jackie, has any questions have come up so far in public engagement for Karen or myself?
Yep, there is a question for Karen. Adele asked, is there an elegant way to share a presentation but still have the presenter on camera? She would like to be able to show photos but still be present on camera and talk at the same time, and would like to avoid being a disembodied voice talking over a slideshow.
That's a great question, and it does do that in Zoom. So when I'm sharing images that I usually do, so if I want to have a really nice close-up on something, I'm a small screen in the corner, so they can still see me pointing and moving in my space, but I can also then highlight things on the shared screen as well. There are lots of software packages that you can do as well that we talked about in Web 101, and that's all, the videos are online now that you can view. And there's some more technical ways to do it, but certainly Zoom allows you to have that sort of picture-in-picture aspect, which is really helpful.
There were also some questions from Tom, and it's about, I think, your webcam and how it was able to zoom in and out. Is this something that is controlled by Zoom?
No, I have a little remote control that goes with my camera, and it's a Logitech PZ HD. Again, all of the data of that is in Stephen Bancroft's presentation on the website for the Web Conferencing 101. And it's got a remote control. So I get to press the button of which camera zoom I'd like to go into. And that makes it nice and simple for me to move around my space with the camera. Pointy, I can go to things behind me. I can zoom into that volcano if I want to do something on dynamic earth or geology. So creates a quite dynamic experience. Thanks.
We also have a question about child safety. Would Karen or Ben like to answer this one?
Over to you, Ben, for that one.
Sure. What would you like to know?
Rena asked, for small groups with kids, is there a standard permission form for an online video chat session we may obtain?
Okay, all right. So that's something we actually get inquiries about for our own programs, traditional outreach. Not really. I mean, we could create one in some degrees. The problem is it's technically like a legal advice question. But here's the deal. If you have a chat with your local school, they'll have their usual parent permission slips for traditional excursions to the pool or the beach or whatever they do. It's the same thing, but there's a little bit extra you got to put in there. No matter what, remember that this is a digital medium, and so kids' faces and their audio are being transmitted. So it really is almost like permissions and media release pushed together. And also being aware of that, be aware of cultural sensitivities that come with this too. Just having to understand that people's faces are being transmitted. And also, if you're recording your session, you need to be very upfront saying, we are going to record it. Now, here's the thing though, if someone opts out saying they don't want to record, I mean, I could do this, it's not great, but I mean, I'd turn off my face, you can still hear me, and I've stopped doing that, I'll come back again. You could ask the kids to mute their video, but there's a chance they may not. So just be aware of that. I mean, I'm not giving a great answer. It's only because there is no real standard form. Maybe contact up. Now, Karen's got a hand up. She can probably add to this.
Certainly when you're setting up your session, if you are doing families and kids, if you're having the parent booking, you can put it in your terms and conditions that they're taking responsibility. I don't record my sessions for the child protection reasons. I also have a waiting room enabled and a link that is has privacy settings on it. So only the people that the parents that I send it to can then log in, and I'm checking people off to make sure everyone in my session. So you can manage that with small numbers, but if it's a parent booking directly on behalf of their child, they're assuming that responsibility, and you are just under the condition that you are saying you're not going to publish, you're not going to share it, you're not going to record it. So you just need to be careful around that. And if you want to do big things, then you certainly need to look at getting permission forms if it's a teacher school session. In that case. Okay, I think we need to hand over to Heather and Bridget. I was going to call you Brittany for a moment. Apologies there. And we're really looking forward to the follow-up on the ANSTO work.
Hi there, Karen and everyone. Fantastic to be joining you today. And I've been so inspired, like many of you have, I'm sure, by all of the things that have been shown and talked about, how you can use those kind of physical objects in the environment around you. And of course, with COVID-19, we were all stuck in our houses pretty much. So even going to the backyard and finding something that, you know, people might not have had, even, you know, finding those kids' drawings, pictures up on your walls, anything that you have to share is a fantastic way to engage your audience. Now, ANSTO has the wonderful challenge of not being able to show things at the atomic scale. It's a little bit too small for your average electron microscope. And also some of the really interesting areas which at ANSTO are not able to be shown on the physical tours, which they've been doing for many, many years. So we partnered with ANSTO 6 or 7 years ago at the start of developing their virtual tours, which has then morphed into e-learning. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to invite Bridget Murphy from ANSTO to tell us a little bit about how they've been using those resources. But I wanted to start now and just share with you one of the a few of the resources that we created to help sort of tell that story of what exactly ANSTO does. So I'll pop on the movie experience for you now.
You're about to go on a journey into the world of atoms. A world that forms the building blocks of everything in the universe. From the mind-boggling distances of space to the wonder of the world around us. We are formed from complicated components that are far, far smaller than the eye can see. From the billions of different cells that make up the myriad of life on this planet, to the DNA that forms the blueprint of our genetic code, and even further into the atomic world. Here, electrons travel at just under the speed of light. Protons and neutrons are bound strongly together by nuclear forces. Billions and billions of atoms fit into a space no larger than the head of a pin. Welcome to the amazing world of ANSTO. Our journey begins here at OPAL, Australia's only research reactor. Come with us now and explore the story into the very core of a nuclear reactor.
So ANSTO's nuclear reactor, as you see, is a research reactor, and its job is to look at things in great detail. So we wanted to have a way to show that kind of detail by sort of zooming right in from, you know, it's about that universe scale, and then zooming right down to the atomic scale, and then to show the reactor itself. That's one part of the resources that we use. We actually created animations of all of the neutron beam instruments that are used at ANSTO, as well as the reactor itself. So I had the wonderful but challenging job of standing above the reactor and filming it with this great videographer, and we took some 3D photos and added some interactivity to this. Now, it all sort of started as let's make a purely interactive experience, but then we found that it was actually useful to really talk to people as you go and get that input and, you know, really understand that. And so Bridget's going to tell us a little bit in a second about how they've then split up those resources and used those. So video is a wonderful way to really take your audience on a journey with you, and to introduce them, and then, you know, further than that, sort of talk to them about what they did as well. And we took that opportunity when we had to kind of redraw the reactor from that those CAD drawings and those engineering drawings in great detail, and then to really split it up and use it in a bunch of different ways. So I'm just going to share again briefly a few of the other resources that we created there. Thank you, webinar, for making this easy. I saw some great questions about sharing screens and moderating, and I hope that this has been a very seamless experience for you in this resource. But I work in a small business, so I often do a lot of all of this by myself, and I have to say moderating and sharing and doing everything yourself can be very, very challenging. It's also very challenging to talk to a blank screen as you're presenting. But it is a great way to get across more of what you do. And what we had to do is, as I say, we had to really, draw and illustrate things that were happening at that atomic scale. We wanted to make it an interactive experience. This is one of the things in an early version of the tour where, of course, if you've got a nuclear reactor, you want to know, well, what would happen if I raise the pool temperature, say? And then we can talk about the safety protocols and, how you prevent a reactor from going into flux and different things like the water flow and the radiation level, and really unpack the science of all of those different levels in a way that's quite interactive. As I say, we also took some great photos. It's really easy to take a 3D photo and use that. There's software that you can use. You can actually upload 3D photos into web browsers and create a bit of a virtual tour of your own building and your own area. It's really not that hard to do. It was a wonderful experience to do it here with the reactor, redraw it. As I say, we did quite a lot of animation and a lot of different videos for that. And then we built it out into different sections. And one of the most important things is we've been emphasising for engaging your audience is thinking about, well, what did they actually want to know? So, they might have gone for a nuclear medicine scan. They might want to know what that process is like. What is radiation in the first place? Can we unpack that for school kids? What's the nuclear fuel cycle and the questions that you have around that? So just the way that you sort of organise your information and your content as well. One of the other things we did was to create an interactive map of the beamline research. There's a bunch of different really amazing instruments there which are used in different ways. So finding ways to talk about what they did and to explore that physical environment, you can do just by creating a little map of the area. And using a lot of the imagery and talking about that imagery so you can talk in detail about what's happening there. But I will leave it to the expert, Bridget, who's been using this for many years, and ask her to join me to talk about that. And Bridget, over to you. I'd love to hear more about how you've been using that.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So, hi everyone, my name's Bridget. I'm the Education Manager at ANSTO. So we are located down at Lucas Heights in southern Sydney, and we are the location of Australia's only nuclear reactor. So in terms of science communication, I guess we have a bit of a challenge in the message that we need to communicate. Firstly, a lot of people come to us because they may have a certain level of skepticism, negativity, potentially distrust of our organisation, what we do. So it's really important for whatever we're doing to build trust, to maintain that personal connection with people in order to build trust, that they're not just being fed a message. And as Heather said before, another big challenge for us too is to communicate really highly technical information. We're talking about some of Australia's most important infrastructure that you can't find anywhere else, but that is doing science at a scale that you can't see with your naked eye. So the animations and the videos that Heather's team have put together have been really instrumental for us to be able to tell a story and really help people visualise things that they can't see otherwise. So the package that, yes, Heather?
I was just going to add to that, Bridget, thanks, that one of the things I thought was really interesting talking to you before about how you're using that that content was in the Meet a Scientist session. So you have ANSTO scientists who come and talk about what they do. As many of you who are working in sort of science and science communication know, there's obviously some great talent in science communication from the science side, but it's not always easy to translate from that research scale right down to school audiences or general public audiences. So I loved what you said about how you can sort of, an education officer almost acts as a moderator to jump in and say, great point, Kate, about that research that you're doing. Here's how it works in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, that's right. So, for example, some of the videos that and animations that Heather has put together are, fantastic animations of, for example, PET scans. So we might have an expert who's talking about their research that they're doing about nuclear medicines, and they might be talking about fluorine-18, which is the nuclear medicine that you use to perform PET scans. And we might have an education officer who can jump in and say, great point there, Ben. we're going to jump in and just show, and I might be able to do this just here. Here we go. Just show you a little video here of how we run one of these PET scans. And one important decision that we made with these resources is we chose for them not to have a voiceover. For a couple of reasons. The audio over video conferences does tend to be a little bit delayed. It can chop and change. And also because we're using these videos for a range of different audiences, we can modify the story that we tell over the top. So if we're explaining this video, for example, to primary school students, we tell a totally different story to if we're talking to some third-year nuclear medicine university students, for example. Okay. I will just show you another example too. So another type of video conference that we do is our inquiry skills video conferences, where we have a whole lot of equipment, including radiation detectors, radioactive objects that teachers don't necessarily have access to at school. And we will ask students and teachers to come up with an experiment using this equipment that they'd like to do, and they can perform that with us via video conference. So we'll use the second camera to go in and focus in on the dial of the scintillation counter, for example, help them collect the data in real time, and then we'll give the students some time to work in groups and present the results and discussion questions back to us. So they might have a piece of butcher's paper that they've drawn a graph of their results, and they'll hold it up in front of the camera and we'll discuss and give them feedback. So it's certainly not just a one-way information sharing session. We try to make it a dialogue as well. And one real benefit of the resources that we made together with Heather is once we've done that sort of experiment, we can then jump to, say, for example, this flyover of our reactor and really put the results that we've got from that experiment and talk about the real life applications. So this is a flyover of Australia's only nuclear reactor, OPAL. And you can see as you look down into it, it's actually got a bit of a shimmer. You can see the wave there because there is 13 metres of water over the top of the core of the reactor there that you can see underneath that square grate in the middle. And the reason why that water is there is for two reasons. So, for example, if we've just done a shielding experiment where we're looking at the effect of lead or the effect of paper as a shield for radioactivity, we can say we use this knowledge and these principles in real life to design our reactor. We use water as a really effective shield and a really effective coolant as well. So we've just found that we've been able to use these resources in a range of different ways. We can use them in our tours as well to help our tour attendees really understand and visualise some of the really small concepts that we're talking about when we point at our reactor or point at our neutron scattering facilities as well. Anything you want to add there, Heather?
No, I love seeing it again. It's certainly amazing to be able to sort of look down and into a nuclear reactor and really see what's happening there. I think we've got a couple of questions, Jackie K, to run through. So I might just hop into those questions.
Yep, no problem, Heather. Emily asked a question, I think, while you were playing the video beforehand. How do you play with video so well? Did you have to have it downloaded on your end? And does the quality depend on your own internet connection?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the Web 101 Essentials, we did talk about doing a speed test of your internet. So really essential to understand your own internet first. Be respectful of other people's internet as well. So I do love to show that video, and I do love to show videos, but it can always backfire on you. So I always download the video onto my local computer. I'm playing just with local sound. I don't have the kind of setup that Karen and Ben do. So I'm just playing that off my computer sound, make sure that I've got that sound high. I did try it on Monday with a whole bunch of different videos that were also embedded from YouTube, and that worked fine as well. So I think the main thing is really just to understand your upload speed. That's what's going to control your audience experience. Having said that, if people have a poor download speed, there's not much that you can do. They are going to have that jittery experience or that sound not being so well. So I think one of the important things, if you are doing anything that is sort of highly digital, is to provide analog counterparts, talk about what you're doing and what you're seeing, and just be aware that the experience might be different for different people. And we'll have links to that speed test and to all of these ideas and resources in the resources that we'll be sending out to you as well after this session.
Yep. And just to add to that too, in terms of the way we're running our video conferences with schools in particular, if schools are dialing in from school, they've often got a whole lot of firewall issues, Wi-Fi issues that they need to contend with. So we always organise a test dial beforehand, as I know that Ben and Karen and all the guys who have been in the business for a very long time, it's always worth doing a test. Even if you've done a video conference with them the year before, it's worth doing a test to make sure that things haven't changed.
We did have another question for Heather, I believe. Olga asked, how much of the video production is done in-house and how much by an external provider?
Yeah, so that kind of video production, absolutely by an external provider. We're talking about, software that can map things to engineering drawings and really in-depth, kind of animation like that. We do a couple of different levels of animation. Animation is one of those things where it can, as Bridget knows, it can be this big a length of string, or it can be a length of string that goes around the world, depending on what you want to get out of it and how you want to do it. There's plenty of options, I have to say. You can use other people's videos in your presentations, but if you're doing anything that is basically your business presenting as a business, there are copyright issues. So do just be aware of those copyright issues, ask permission if in doubt, and just be aware of what you're using. There could be questions around that. Having said that, as I say, those were great examples I thought of, Ben just getting his little farmer's friend from the car park. There's no reason that you can't use video that's almost everybody's phone nowadays has video which takes extraordinary quality. So just kind of finding ways that you can do video and do things like that. A lot of the video editing software has little WYSIWYG tools where you can create an animation around a title quite easily. So it's easy to create your own intro and outro. We've certainly had to just start doing it ourselves and just playing around with it. So there's a lot of options out there, but that kind of thing, yeah, that was something else.
Thank you very much, Heather. I think it might be time for our break. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Awesome. So I might just spotlight Ben N, if that's all right, to let us know what's going to happen in the next section.
No worries. You said Ben N because at one point we had 3 Bens at Fizzics, but now it's 2. Now, in the interest of learning about engaging audiences in multiple ways, this is not so much of a risk, but I want you to imagine you did this yourself. We're about to go on a 5-minute break. Doesn't just mean coffee and tea, though that's important. What we're going to get you to do is do a scavenger hunt, of all things. We want you to go to your players, and I'm going to put this list into the chat, and you've been totally sidelined. You didn't know this was going to happen. We're going to give you a list of very simple things that you likely have in your home, and the point of it is that in 5 minutes time, and I'll do the 5-minute countdown, and by the way, you can find online timers so things drop down to 0. You're going to do some experiments in your room. Now remember though, if I look down the bottom, there are nearly 130 participants. Now, we can't see you, nor can we hear you, which means imagine that you're in our position and you're trying to do something live to that many people who you can't see nor hear. Imagine the troubleshooting involved. They can only type at you. So we're going to do a little bit of experiments. Some is going to honestly involve just you, the person, and other things are going to be simple things that you can do. So, there you go. That's what's awesome about having moderators. Copy, paste, shove in the chat. So that is your list. You're going to need a book. You're going to need a pen, a couple scraps of piece of paper, a banknote with a face on it. And if you haven't got it, by the way, the world is okay. But that is your break time. And we'll be back at 1:55 AEST. Sorry, we're in Sydney, so it's a little Sydney-centric, but that's where I am. And Honestly, go grab a tea, coffee, Milo, cold water, and those materials, and we'll see you soon. Okay, how did you go? You got your stuff? Now, I want you to when you think about this. Who wrote, "I zero money in my wallet"? Sounds like you've got my wallet. I've got no money either. No, here's the thing. You didn't get any warning. Now, of course, if you're planning to do things, obviously you could send out a PDF and they could get the materials, and importantly, have all those materials on your end so that you can do it in case some people don't have the materials. Because here's the thing, it's a reality. Even if you only got 20 people, 20 adults in a library, for example, and you wanted to teach them something, maybe they couldn't get the stuff, which means you need to have those materials on hand, because it does make a difference if you're planning on something and no one's got anything. So here's the deal. Some of you will have things and some of you will just not at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw to Jackie for our first activity, because this doesn't involve anything but honestly a person. So Jackie, what do you got for us?
Alrighty. Hi guys. You can probably see me. There we go. I'm just sitting in my home office. I have my headset on, but that's all I need for the first couple of experiments that we thought would be cool to show you. So if you wanted to talk about the concept of pressure, you don't need anything except for a head and hopefully at least one hand. That's very helpful, having a hand. So the way that we talk about pressure, so we always talk about force spread out over an area. So you can get your audience to take their hand nice and flat, put it on your head, and push as hard as you can with one hand. And then for variable testing, take one finger, put it on about the same place, and push as hard as you can. So in both cases, we're using the strength, the force that one arm can exert, but the variable that changes is the amount of area that's in contact with your head. And you might notice that when you push with your finger, it hurts a lot more than if you're using your hand on your head. I might look a bit silly, but you know what? If you do have younger members in your audience, they will love that. They will love that you look a little bit silly. And definitely get them to do it with you. Another one you can do with just your hands is you can talk about friction and energy transformation. So if I put my hands together and rub them, I feel heat and I hear a sound. So that tells me that movement energy has converted to sound and heat energy. Another one, this is where the banknote comes in handy. I've pre-folded mine, but basically you take a banknote with a big face on it. I've chosen a Singaporean $50 note because that was the biggest face I could find in my random drawer full of international money. First, you want to fold your money this way, right down the center where the nose is. So you should have a triangle shape like this. And then you want to fold the money the opposite way in the center of the eyes. So that's one eye. And then the other eye. So you should, if you look sideways, get this little pointy triangle, and that's where the nose should be. And the two dips on either side are where the eyes are. Now, if you hold this up to a camera and tilt it slightly, you can see sad face or happy face. So that's just a cool little optical illusion you can do with a banknote, and hopefully, Susan, you're absolutely right. This is not as easy with Australian plastic money. You will need to fold it a little bit harder. I'm going to throw this to someone else who has ideas. Oh, Ben, you have some cool things to show us, don't you?
Yes, I can do something there, and I was just sort of smiling. So part of your interactivity, if your plastic Australian dollar, it's dollar, what am I doing, living in 1983? Your $5 note is not working for you. You could always draw a happy little face or a sad face should you feel, and you could try that with a piece of paper. Sort of works, sort of doesn't, depends on how you go. But hey, here's the deal. You got to do something that was kinesthetic, something that involved a person. Now, just be aware, notice that Jackie also just holding that note. I haven't got my note because I honestly didn't have it with me, but she turned it sideways right at camera. Now, it went a bit blurry, but did it matter? Probably not. You could see at least what she was trying to achieve. Often people think about the production quality being important. Yes, it is, but sometimes just communicating how to do the thing matters. So really fast, because we want to move on to our next speaker. We're going to do a real quick one. Get your book. And I'll get my book. So I get a book. You want a book and a piece of paper, right? So I want you to hold both book and paper. And those people who are in science outreach, you've done this plenty of times, but all science teachers, hold it out. And without breaking the thing that's on your desk, notice you actually have to call that out, because with 100 odd people, someone could break a thing on their desk. So without breaking a thing on your desk, or put it near where it's not going to hit on the floor, we're going to drop at the count of 3 and see what happens. What do you predict will happen? Which will hit the desk first? Ready? 1, 2, 3, and drop. Yes. The book hit first. And then you ask the people, let's do it in the chat because it's meant to be about engagement. Tell me, why did the book hit the ground first? Go. Who can type fastest? Go, go, go. Type, type, type. I'm watching. Air resistance book. It's heavier. It's quick. Lots less resistance. And again, remember I talked at the start, the public chat gets out of hand. Magic. Love your work. Was that Dell? Feathers. No, fair enough. So we're getting a bit of an idea. Now, obviously, we could put a poll in it and we could see people watch the graph back and forth of what they think. Yeah, it turns out it's about air. So here's the deal. What we're going to do, get your book again. Put your piece of paper on top. Now, notice, okay, I cut mine so it was like exactly the same height, so size, but if you haven't, you know, tear it or something. Get them on top and drop it. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. All right. Air was hitting the book, but it wasn't hitting the paper. So something's going on. What if we finish this off? Now, I usually do this in a much slower, more thoughtful way where we, talk with the audience a lot more and ask about, what is the null hypothesis? I knew it's a problem with presenting to scientists. But the question is, which one falls faster and why? So how about this? We drop them together. Will they fall at the same speed when you've screwed up a piece of paper? What do you believe? Same speed or not same speed? People are going, just come on, let's do it. So if there's no typing, we have to assume to get going. So ready, 1, 2, 3, ready, 1, 2, 3, go. Yes, they all hit at the same speed. Now, from an engagement point of view, that's fine. And we'll tell the science enough. Mind you, I did drop and mine went past camera, which can sort of be a problem because you can't really show to the audience that truly what the result was. Now, by the way, yes, air resistance is the issue. If I open this back up, it will fall slower because air is in the way. Now, of course, there's a force calculation as well you can get into, but for now, at least you can see that with 2 bits of simple stuff hanging around the room, we had 100 people doing a thing all over Australia. Now, there are other ways to engage audiences with experiments, but just be aware that A plus B equals C really fast works in a conference, not crazy algorithm of different activities and cut the paper here and whatever else. If you're expecting that to happen in a minute, it's very challenging. So if you are going to do a far more elaborate activity, which is really what this is really about, put a timer up. You can get classroom timers. They are free off the internet. Or if you feel like just putting a timer on your phone or whatever it is, put your timer out, and that means people can see how long they've got. We ran a science club, 9 years ago, and we really needed that timer because we had multiple groups all working on build challenges. And the only way to pull them all back together again was to have that timer, because we didn't have the ability to pull everyone back from a group chat like you can in Zoom these days. So that's just an important thing. Yeah, the one with the, yeah, that's true. Absolutely. All right, so let's move on because we want to make sure that we're focused heavily on engaging audiences, and we can go into the more detail with the, yes, gravity on Earth does accelerate 9.8 meters per second. That is true. Everything falls the same speed unless air is in the way. But we have Gary Westmore from ACME, 100% done ACME's done a lot of work in video conferencing for many years, and Gary can give you a bit of a heads up of what they're getting up to in 2020.
Absolutely, although I'm learning a lot already in this session, so it just goes to show that no matter how long you've been doing it, there's still a lot to learn. I'm just going to try and share my screen as well with you. You did mention a little bit earlier, Ben, we actually loved doing acknowledgements, and part of our sort of reconciliation action plan at ACME has been to, always acknowledge traditional owners. So I'm on the land of Wurundjeri. ACME is sort of in an interesting position. It's kind of in a sort of contentious position right in the heart of the CBD. So we acknowledge Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And one thing we're trying to also sort of work into our on-site delivery and virtual delivery as well is asking the students as well what country they're on, and we're sort of trying to give them a bit of a heads up as well before the session as well. So just trying to open with that acknowledgement, also but asking about their experience and the country that they're on. We're also in an interesting position at ACME as well, because we've been closed for about 12 months now for a renewal, and we were due to reopen this month actually, and then it was going to be mid-2020, and now who knows, obviously with COVID-19. So we weren't actually offering a great deal of video conferences or virtual lessons start of the year, because we thought we were going to be on-site delivering. So you can imagine that there was a bit of a scramble from us, and so we've been trying to honour our VCE and professional development sessions to get them online, because we did have a theatre, a cinema to deliver out of in Melbourne. So that's been really interesting, because normally we will be doing virtual sessions with a class or a handful of classes, to sort of having upwards of 100, 150 VCE students and teachers all logging on, independently from their own homes. So you can imagine that the challenges we've had to face in sort of moderating that, and and privacy concerns and all those sorts of things. So that's been quite interesting. So we're about to announce some virtual lessons, which we're going to start delivering in term 3. So we're right in the midst of that process at the moment. So this is really a great time to be having these sorts of discussions and picking up these sorts of tips from everyone. On the topic of sort of virtual excursions, I guess we have sort of steered away from virtual excursions because I think translating that, the exhibition experience to a virtual one is challenging. We've never tried to sort of go into our exhibitions and deliver a virtual exhibition, that we have done similar to what you guys were doing earlier, taking things out of our exhibition, having them there, objects and things that we can show, rather than trying to replicate the exhibition experience. I think that is just quite fraught. And I was reading a really interesting article about, this massive pivot from museums to virtual delivery. There was a quote in there about, don't try and replicate the exhibition experience. You're not turning the physical experience into a virtual one. Something's going to get lost in translation. You should just be really trying to, create it as its own experience with its own sort of considerations. But it's going to be a challenge for us in the future, because we would like to do, bring more of the exhibition to a virtual audience. But I don't think that will involve us going into the exhibition, but pulling things out of it and having those wonderful objects and things to point to. So in the past, we've had a real mixed bag of video conferences and virtual sessions. So we've had things like Meet the Makers, where we would get people working in the industry, animators, directors, storyboard artists, and sort of giving students a chance to pick their brains. And we'd sort of have a bit of an interview, and kids would interview them. So there's a really wonderful way of bringing those experts into the classroom. We did something similar with masterclass video conferences, where we might actually go through sort of a filmmaking or animation process or part thereof with a guest as well. Screen it video conferences, which were to support our now, unfortunately, no longer running Screen It video, film animation and video game competition. And then we've had things like Keyframe and GamesNet, which have been, term-based projects with multiple classrooms, or in some cases the single classroom, and comedy script writing workshops with the Australian Children's Television Foundation, again, which has sort of been multiple lessons. So we're seeing the same students or the same classrooms multiple times. So, we're really going from the sort of half hour, 45-minute, single video conference to a term-based projects. So really running the full gamut. And I think the one thing we've learned from that, there's no single delivery method, and there's no magic bullet for all those different types of delivery as well. So we've had those small to large numbers. We've had multiple classrooms across multiple schools. We've had one classroom on one computer. We've had classrooms with students with individual computers. So, the sort of engaging and interactivity, does tend to vary, from those different styles. So, but I think the one thing is that there always needs to be some form of engagement, and obviously the best way to do that is through some sort of interactive with the students. And this is just a little terrible graph, I'm sorry. Looking at, I guess, what can we do as a bare minimum? So for those 150 VCE, Year 12 English students that we've had, unfortunately, we can probably at best, use the chat function, use the Q&A function. But even that is really, really powerful and gives students a chance to, write really considered questions of our presenters, comment, with each other. We've definitely set it up so that students can't message each other. They can only sort of message us or, in the public forum. And we always, set up the expectations. We don't try and, tell them the do's and don'ts necessarily, but just how it's going to run. And we haven't had any problem with, students being disrespectful or rude or having to kick them out. You would hope not at Year 12 anyway. So there's all these things that we can do as basic minimum, but as the classes get smaller, or the higher the frequency that we see these students, we can obviously start doing more. So lots of pair group activities, even having sort of being able to acknowledge individuals or have a bit of communication with the individuals, students sharing their work on screen, and that can be either via the computer, the work they've done on the computer, or holding things up to the camera. We have had opportunities where we've been able to feedback and directly talk to individuals and pairs and groups as well. One lovely thing that we like to do is if we have multiple schools, is develop that inter-school acknowledgement. So one class, saying good morning to the school from, the class from the other school, that sort of thing. So really trying to bridge that gap as best we can. And now we're getting to the point, so maximum interaction. I think we're reaching a threshold when we are, connecting before and after the session, when students are able to share individual screens and show you their work and get, real-time feedback if it's appropriate. Can be really, really powerful, but it is a lot of work as well at the same time. I do want to say today that I'm not really practicing exactly what I preach, because we try and have, either a green screen set up or, some cool filmmaking or animation props around. You just, in my living room, unfortunately, I have quite not unfortunately, but I have quite a big Mac, which is very hard to maneuver around the room. The lighting's terrible in here. So we would always try and set up, a relatively good-looking presentation that's lit a bit better. I certainly wouldn't have natural light coming in like this, that sort of thing. A virtual background is always really, really fun as well. We have in the past gotten classes to choose our virtual background that we want to key in on the green screen too. So again, just another sort of way to interact and break down, I guess, that barrier. And so I'm not paying attention to the chat as well. I should have a look if anything's coming through there. One thing as well, just sort of back on the setup as well. Karen, I loved your props as well. I love having things in the background. I think that is really, really incredible. And Ben, obviously love your green screen as well. Although I'm dying to find out what you would where you would ultimately like to go on your first holiday when we're out of isolation in your background at some stage, if possible. And I didn't do the proper ACME introduction. So we are the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. So you can imagine that a lot of our content, you know, we want lots of video content and, you know, video games and animation and that sort of thing. But because of the, you know, I guess, you know, that not always being able to rely on great internet connection can be a bit of an issue. I think that we've only recently discovered in Zoom there is this optimized video for full screen presentation, which I think takes your video thumbnail out and it should give you a higher frame rate. I think that often when you play back a video from Keynote or a PowerPoint presentation, there is generally a loss of frame rate and a bit of degradation of the video. So I think that optimized for full screen video should hopefully give you a bit of a clearer video. But what we're sort of working with at the moment for our new virtual lessons is thinking about, can we have those videos and can we just drop in the links to those videos as backups in case we have really, really terrible internet on the other end or on the school's end? Yeah, can we provide them digital copies of those videos or links so they can watch them live? We did do that recently with a video. Students watched a 5-minute animation and it was actually kind of amazing because they watched the animation on their screen and we were able to watch their reaction to the video rather than watching the video ourselves. So that was kind of really interesting and really, really fun as well. So we want to have activities in there. I think Bridget was saying earlier, you know, you don't want it to be a one-way street and just sort of bombarding people with information, which I kind of feel like I'm doing now. Again, I'm not practicing what I preach very well. But we do have to think about what is achievable, and you know, there is a bit of a sliding scale with how many students, how many connections, how many schools, how many classrooms can affect how much you can get away with, and not being able to presume heaps and heaps about what kind of equipment schools have available to them for a 45-minute video conference. You know, we might not have the time to get an itinerary or a list of, you know, how many iPads and things they have in their room. So we do tend to fall back to those brainstorm and discussion activities, those ideation activities, pencil and paper, you know, and providing that means for some students to present back. So we're hoping at the very least we have an okay internet connection, video and audio, so that we can, you know, communicate and get those ideas. Obviously with longer virtual units, we go a bit further. We can find out about what equipment they have, the computers they're using, that sort of thing, and we can obviously up the ante. And we're also working a lot more pre and post activities into our sessions. So we want to encourage teachers to strike whilst the iron is hot, you know, whilst the kids are still inspired to go do those activities, things that we don't necessarily have the time for in that session, or might be a bit more, you know, equipment or technology heavy, things that we can't necessarily do, you know, right there during this session as well. It's not to say that, you know, don't be ambitious. I really like the activities that we've already done today, and one that I'm thinking of trying to do for an animation talk is to get students to do a pixelation animation activity. Pixelation is basically where you apply stop motion animation theory. Instead of doing it to Lego or, you know, claymation figurines, you do it to people, so getting people to do the impossible. So I'm trying to work in a pixelation activity where we can get the students, you know, appearing and reappearing all around the room. So basically directing a bit of a stop motion animation and then playing it back to them just to sort of explain some of the, you know, fundamental thinking behind animation, how it works, and then they can obviously go and do that themselves at a later date, or hopefully directly after the lesson. So yeah, we're still experimenting, and you know, we're going to be trying out a program and some methods that we haven't necessarily tried out before. So we're very much in experimentation phase as well. I think that's all I had in that presentation. I'll just stop my share.
Gary, we have a question for you, if that's all right. So Stephanie would like to ask, do you find kids are more or less shy via video conferencing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. We tend to tread a bit more carefully with secondary students. I think it's just because of that, you know, the hormones and the age, and, you know, there is a great deal of shyness. You know, even with year 12s that we had recently, you know, students were writing questions in the Q&A, and we were saying, you know, feel free, we can unmute you if you'd like to ask the question directly. And they're like, no, just read out my question for me. I haven't had a particular problem with primary ever. Except we have we do get a lot of homeschools come in and join us, and so often we'll just get an email beforehand saying, look, you know, my child doesn't like to appear on screen, and they might just have their camera off, or they might be off screen, and they just bring in a thumbs up or a thumbs down for a response, that sort of thing. And that's happened in the classroom as well. So I think it's just being open and flexible to that, and you know, you don't have to demand that interaction or that them feedback and presenting their work, but it's ideal if you can do it. But yeah, we're always prepared that there will be students who don't want to appear, don't want to speak up, or are happier discussing in pairs or groups, and then having someone else feedback the group's idea, or the teacher can come up to the camera and say what they want to say, things like that. We found it pretty easy to be adaptable.
We also have another question from Jackie, not me, a different Jackie. Gary, do you do live online workshops for adults, and how would your approach differ to designing for kids?
We don't do a great deal for adults. We do teacher professional learning, but they're usually more focused around English and media subjects, so they're a bit more information heavy, I guess. I don't think we've attempted, at least not for a long time, adult online, you know, sessions around filmmaking or animation. We've done those all on site. I think that the main differences would be that we will probably preload, I guess, those participants with, you know, please download this and we want you to have this application in this program. Whereas we're a little less demanding on students and schools, just that sensitivity around some schools are funded to the, you know, to the high hilt, and others, you know, might not have a, you know, an old DSLR lying around to use. So, yeah, it's just those considerations.
We have one more question from Laura, who just wanted to know about recording masterclasses and placing videos online afterwards. Do you have any experience with that, and what kind of engagements can be had at that time?
Yeah, well, we have put things up in the past, and the big issue is setting up Zoom recording so that you're not getting participants' video into your master recording. We found that quite easy to edit out, so we're just left with the our video feed and the presentation and the video, but there is a bit of work to do afterwards before we put that sort of thing online. In terms of engagement with that material, yeah, it's quite difficult, and I think that we're having a little bit of a reckoning with this at the moment with our online resources and also virtual lessons and same with our on-site workshops, I should say, you know, trying to avoid just come in, hello, you did this fun thing, see you never. Again, you know, we want to, you know, try and see the results of the work they do after the sessions or after the workshops, and trying to set up a bit of a platform that we can hear from and see the work that the students have been doing after the session, because, yeah, there's a little bit of a tendency to just that's it. You might see them, you know, in a year or two's time when they're in a different year level and come in for a different workshop or a different session. So engaging with that content when it's just been put up as a video is quite difficult. There's survey links, they can email us, but that's, you know, that's about it, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much for that, Gary. I am going to pass the mic back to Ben for some experience sharing.
No worries, and Karen Player will be very much be able to help out with this too. A couple of points. Yes, I've talked to adults, retirement homes, juvenile justice centres, libraries, you name it. If they've got a camera they're allowed to have, we use it. Thing is though, know your audience deeply. So retirement centres, presenting to an adult audience in retirement centre, you have to remember they've got a lifetime of experience. Now, as you can probably pick up from the way I talk, I'm fairly excitable. I talk really fast. That's a problem. Talk simply and enunciate your words, because sometimes you might need to work with the on-site staff to turn their volume up. Not in their hearing aid, literally on the actual screen themselves. Sometimes I'll have it low, and then you get this concern saying, oh, I can't hear, and it turns out that they hadn't just turned the volume up on their data projector or their TV. Also, when presenting to those audiences, I recommend co-presenting. You might be the subject matter expert, and you are. That's why you're in the organisation that you are in. But the reality is that they want to share what happened over their lives, because often you'll learn just as much, and that's important. Now, on the juvenile justice centres, as well as, I haven't done the adult prison one, there's issues around what they can show via video. So they literally just have to have the video off. Trust me, the on-site staff will know a lot more about that than you. Just follow their lead. Libraries. Especially librarians have a bucket load of experience with engaging with public. Work with them, and they might have quite easily have done a bit of web conferencing. We'll actually share a bit more about work we've done with libraries in the following series. I was just thinking too about engagement tools which we haven't talked about. 3 came to mind. One is called Flipgrid. Flipgrid took the schooling sector by storm a couple of years ago, and has been picked up by Microsoft. It's completely free. And what it does, it kind of looks like Pinterest. If you like Pinterest, series of pins of websites you've seen in the world. Now, what it means though is imagine those little cards are 2-minute videos. Now, what Flipgrid can be done is asynchronous learning, whereby you could pose a question to your audience via your smartphone, and people can reply back to you with their 2-minute pieces of whatever it is they want to do. Now, I was looking in the chat, people are talking about story time. That's cool. I know that Flipgrid's been used for doing world read alouds, whereby each person could read 1 page of the singular book. And then maybe you could be doing this with your research in some way or shape or form. Other things you can use. There is a platform called Voki, V-O-K-I. V-O-K-I is neat because that's actually animation based. What that means is you effectively have this cartoon avatar. Maybe you want Einstein, maybe you want Marie Curie, maybe you just want your weird version of yourself. But what it is that your voice can come out of that avatar, which is kind of cool. People can engage with that. There's another platform called Superlame. Superlame, L-A-M-E. That's like cartoons, only this time you get to change the speech bubble. Now, I've used that before. It's been a while since I've used Superlame. But what's kind of neat about that is you can have people in the public chat or in the question and answer say, in this scene, something's happening. Maybe it's the discovery of whatever it is that you're interested in. And there's a speech bubble around the scientist. So what was the scientist thinking? What did the scientist say? Whatever it is. And people can write the chat, and all you do is you copy that and you shove that into the speech bubble, and people effectively get very competitive about who gets to get their words on the speech bubble. It also gets to work out, is the audience following you completely with what you're trying to do? Look, there's a lot of tech out there and a work to treat. Karen, what are your thoughts at this juncture?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to keep your audience engaged. And I think one of the things we haven't focused on a lot today that we had in last week's session was the passion of the person. And you can see with both Ben and I and everyone that's been joining us here today, if you're interested in your topic and you're interested in communicating, that comes across really well. And when you get excited and animated, your audience will pick that up even in a digital format. Already I'm starting to move my arms around a little bit more, and we have spoken about in the previous sessions as well as, you know, online, that is something you need to watch out for. I usually wander around, so being seated in front of a camera is actually really good for me. I get to focus all of my attention and my interest and excitement about what I'm talking about directly to you. So following up on some of the information we provided in the previous sessions can really help about getting that passion across and that engagement. And a lot of it is that trial and error and a little bit of practice. So using some of your platform tools and recording a practice session and watching it back, or actually doing a live session with a friend or a colleague that you can then just practice going back and forth with each other, you know, looking at the camera, using your props, using a poll, just so when you are using it with a live audience, all of those interactive components will work for your audience, for your program, and will work at the time. So you're not trying to pull something in at the last minute. So all of those kinds of things, your passion, your enthusiasm, your knowledge, your pre-existing knowledge is all there. And it's just a matter of being able to practice on the platforms you're using to make sure that when you press go on a particular app or poll or quiz, that it's going to work because you've practiced with it as well. So I think that's always something to keep in mind. And I know we're officially out of time, but we've got lots of questions still to go. So for those of you who can stick around, we will stick around and we'll get through as many questions as we can until you run out of questions and we run out of answers. So Jackie, did you want to throw some more of the questions up for anyone on the panel?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of questions about co-presenting. Adele asked, is it feasible to be co-presenting with 3 fairly experienced science communicators for a primary/secondary classroom setting? What do we need to consider to make co-presenting effective and engaging, and whether there is an optimal number of people for co-presenting, to want them to like interact with each other as well as the audience, not just as consecutive speakers?
Absolutely. And we've been working on that over the last few weeks. And one of the things that we've come across that works really well is using your other co-presenter by name and actually going, you know, saying their name and saying, hey, would you like to add something to that? So again, knowing your content a little bit, having a rough outline of who is going to say what components, so you can go back and forth between the presenters nice and easily. So I can see that Ben's actually about to message someone, so I was just about to throw to Ben to see if he can add to that. So it's a great way to do it, and just remember there's a lag. So I'm throwing across to Ben. What do you want to add with that one?
Absolutely. And actually what Karen just demonstrated there is be very aware of your panels in the co-presenting, because her video was spotlighted just then, but you could see the couple of squares at the top that I was just answering a quick back channel chat. Remember, that's what we're doing. And it was like, she caught me on the hop. However, one thing to keep in mind, some of you might be from organizations that honestly have multiple campuses, multiple zoos, multiple whatever it is that you do. There is no reason at all that you can't bounce from site to site to site. Your audience totally can follow you, but it's your job to lead them, to take them on that path. And you would have found that we very much do this the whole way through. Now, I'm actually going to throw to another panelist, Bridget, who has a bucket load of experience when it comes to video conferencing. I want to see if you want to throw in your 2 cents worth about some of these ideas of engagement.
Yeah, so first of all, I apologise. You can probably hear ABC Kids in the background because my kids are at the TV. But look, in terms of our experience, I guess we try to keep it as simple as possible in terms of apps that we use or things like that. We really try to keep the Zoom or whatever app that we're using for video conferencing as the main technology that people need to deal with. And then in terms of engagement before or during or after the video conference, we try and keep that as simple as possible. One thing that we do in our Meet an Expert video conferences is that we really throw the onus back on the students to develop their own questions, and we have an expert in front of the camera who gives no presentation whatsoever. So we give them pre-reading, we give them a little bit of, might give them some videos about the scientists, about what they do, and then it is purely a Q&A with the students. So it really puts that onus on participation back on the students to run it. Yeah, Ben.
I'm going to jump on in here. This is the sort of thing like the Karen and I's brains just like going, oh, I remember when. I remember there's an Environmental Education Centre, Field of Mars, used to do a 2-hour video conference. And you might go, oh my gosh, they can't handle 2 hours. They can if they're given 40 minutes of bushland exploring and come back and show me what you found. There are no rules. There actually aren't. We often think of these rigid structures that we've come to grow up with or worse create for ourselves. But in web conferencing, there really isn't. As long as they're engaged and as long as you're hitting your content well, it doesn't matter how you do it. It really doesn't. As long as you're engaging well and safely from a child protection point of view. Cool. So Karen, any other ideas?
Yeah, just adding on from that as well. I think doing that sort of session and having it all the onus on your participants that they are then giving you information, it leads you into amazing directions. You have a framework, you'll have a topic, but if you say, hey guys, this is an opportunity just to really focus on a big Q&A session, it means it's always going to be engaging, because you'll have some people will ask a question that someone else was interested in the answer. It will then make them think of something else and they'll have another question. So it makes it really dynamic, and I find that a lot of those, we did them certainly with scientists when I was still at the Australian Museum, did the Meet the Experts. The scientists always had such a good time. And as a staff member, I facilitated that engagement for them, because maybe the technology was a little bit uncomfortable, or, the idea of being able to talk to the mystery people on the other side, in this case it was school students, was a little bit difficult. So having that sort of educator, I didn't do anything other than make the expert feel comfortable. And they were brilliant sessions, and we ran many of them on lots of different scientific topics. So they're always a really great one to have in your variety of options when you're thinking about your programs and your audiences. And if you've got the opportunity to have someone with that really deep expert knowledge, it's always great to try to include them in programming. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. We have a question from Thomas from a while ago, and I think both Ben and Gary has touched on this a bit. So I'll open this up to whichever panelist would like to answer this one. What are some of the challenges of engaging older, for example, teenagers versus younger audiences online? In Science Week and the Australia Museum, we do both primary and high school week, and it's a very different vibe.
So what you'll notice just then was that silence too. So we're going to say for all panels, I saw in the chat there, Bridget put a hand up. So Bridget, you're up.
Yeah, I think this is a big differentiation between primary and secondary school kids. Primary kids are excited, enthusiastic, happy to give you an answer. I think usually when they get to about year 8, they don't want anything to do with you. And particularly video conferencing just gives them more of an excuse to just not answer. So I think the way that we handle that is we try and scaffold our sessions as part of an activity that they are doing in class. So we try and pitch this at the teachers and say, look, this video conference will be part of a series of lessons that you might do, and this is going to address these curriculum points or whatever, and before and after the session, these are the activities that you're going to be doing, and this can really fit into your lesson plan in this way. And so with that expectation on the students, if it's built into something that they need to hand in, certainly that increases participation rates as well. But another way that I do it as well at the start of the session for high school students in particular is that I will outline my expectations of I am going to set you a question. I'm going to give you 1 minute to write an answer down on the page, because that way you're giving students who may not necessarily be able to formulate an answer immediately in their head time to write it down, time to craft it, and then explain to them, I'm going to get your teacher to select someone to read out their answer. And in that way, you might be able to, you're more likely to get an answer from someone.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. We've actually got a question from Hester that, if everyone doesn't mind, I'd like to answer. Hester asked early in the session, I'm sure that specific tools have specific answers to this question, but are there any resources out there regarding diagnosing technical issues when things go wrong? Being able to tell when an issue is on the host end versus a viewer's end, etc., or general tips for identifying common issues or hiccups. For Fizzics Education webinars, we have found it really useful to have a second device logged in as an attendee. So while I'm talking to you here, I've actually got a second laptop hooked up to a TV. It's huge. I can see it. So whatever you guys are seeing, I can see. So if we share screen, play a video, or put up a poll, and I can't see it on the attendee screen, I know something has gone wrong on my end, and the attendees can't see that. And to be honest, most of the tips that we are able to offer you come from our own experiences and mistakes, and sometimes you just got to try it out, do it, and learn from them, as long as you've tried your best to keep everybody safe. And I can see that Ben wants to jump in on this, so over to you, Ben.
Just a little one. Some of you will have legacy video conference systems. What I mean by that are Tandbergs, Cisco's, Polycoms, all these different versions. They have a diagnostic tool. And so if you go into the diagnostic tool, you're probably not going to use it in a setting like this. I'm talking the old legacy systems. You go into the diagnostics, you can see how many packets of data are coming in, how many packets of data are leaving. You can see what algorithms, and you can see all the stuff. And the thing is, you may not be able to use that stuff potentially live, but at least you know what went wrong. Some web conferencing platforms do have a little bit of back-end finding out what's going on, but they weren't truly designed to do that type of deep level check, because that's what those video conference systems were designed to do. But just know that, yeah, if you have one of those legacy systems, have a look in the diagnostics area and you'll be able to find some of that stuff. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. We have another question. This one's from Nadine. How do you get a whole classroom engaged if they're only seeing you on the classroom TV? Would you recommend having a separate chat app that they can ask you questions or answer your questions with?
Karen threw her hand up.
Yep, I've got my hand up for that one. So yeah, with some students going back to the classroom, we'll find that we may have more people going back to that format. So instead of the individual students or individual adults at home, they may be at a hub or they're back at school seeing things on a big screen. So a lot of what we spoke about in terms of getting the kids to call out or do an action or do an activity in the classroom, it still works really well. You can, plan with the teacher, have materials and resources that they need to have in the classroom. They can make or do something at the same time, give them challenges to go out and collect something, and that can still work really well. If you've got a really, really big group or multiple classes or multiple venues with participants in the one spot, you may well want to then have that moderation and that back channel as well. So that can absolutely work as well. But if it's just a one class, one screen, and the screens they have in their classroom are often quite big. But yeah, I still like to get my kids up doing things, stretching. I, get them to pretend to be a praying mantis. Even the simple activities of feeling the muscles on your head, or the activities that we had Jackie and Ben show us before, are ways that you can keep them engaged. And remember, if you know your content and you're excited and engaged about what you're delivering, that will come across, and the kids, the adults, whatever age your participants are, will pick up on that. I'm just going to throw to Ben because I think he was messaging me to add something to that one as well.
Oh, no, I was all happy. I was actually doing another message. That's the only issue when you're dealing the back channel chat. You can't tell. But definitely there are ways. I've actually seen someone, and this is only once I've seen this done. It's a bit risky. They actually would put on their virtual screen, on their green screen, a message to the other people on the panel, but they had to pull it fast. I saw it. Don't do that. I've seen that actually happen, and it doesn't work because you're going to throw it up eventually. You don't need to do that.
Excellent. What's the next question, Jackie? Do we still have some more to go?
Absolutely. So many questions. I'm sorry, guys, if I don't get to your question in time before we have to go, but we will try our best. Someone asked, do most organizations charge for their webinars or offer them for free? And I think Heather wanted to answer this one.
Yeah, I think that's, obviously we're all putting terrific content out at the moment for free. Someone's got to pay for this at some stage. There's very few paid webinars, but I think if you're going to offer genuine quality content that's going to improve people's skills, I think you absolutely should put a price on that. I think the most important thing that you can do then is just really, let your audience know what they're going to gain out of the experience of having that webinar with you, how they can use that, how they can make the most of that, engage with that audience to make sure that you're delivering what they want. It's a very, very tricky world. The world of content has, never been harder. And I say this absolutely every year that I've been working in content. More and more we expect amazing content to happen for free. It's wonderful to be able to access this. It's wonderful to be able to produce this, but at some stage, we all need to pay for our groceries. So I think, yes, you can charge for your webinar. One thing that you might want to think about, webinar attendance is never going to be what you expect as well. Same as live audiences, fewer people will turn up than you thought. So if you do ask them to pay, that's one way of ensuring that they're invested in that. So yes, keep that in mind. But if you're going to look to charge a significant amount of money, then make sure that you're getting your audience skilled up and make sure it's a learning experience as well as an entertaining experience. I was actually wondering, Gary, if you're in this business, did you want to sort of add anything to that, because you are creating learning experiences in that way?
Oh, absolutely. But I'd just be seconding what you've already said. We tend to offer a bit of a mixture, but we have certainly been in the case where we've had, this free virtual lesson, and we've had, 6 classes say that, register and that they're attending, and not a single one has shown up. And so you've got, you've set up, you've got AV to bring in the cameras and everything. You're all set to go, and nothing's more deflating than having no one show up. But and as you said, Heather, I think that, if you're going to charging, it needs to be a quality experience. Whereas when I hear webinar, I tend to think of a one-way sort of, one-way traffic that they're just tuning in and watching. Certainly, if it's, the more interactive and the more of a lesson or, more skill-based it is, the more confidence that you can charge, I guess.
And that's something really important to factor in, that spectrum of a webinar to a small, intimate forum or a really interactive, learning program of then that spectrum of what you might be charging. So I think it is important just to remember that audience again, the platform you want to use, what engagement you want to get out of it, to give you an idea of what kind of program you want to deliver, and then if there has to be a charge on that as well. Thanks.
Yeah, I might just add in there too, in case because the chat doesn't turn up in the recording. So the reason you're able to watch this is through the Inspiring Australia State Networks and the New South Wales Chief Scientist Engineer. And thanks very much for Northern Territory, Queensland, South Australia, ACT, WA and New South Wales for helping put this together. So are there any other further questions there?
Yes, Ben. Zoe has a question. What is the best way to engage an audience when presenting an live outdoors virtual experience?
Get your sound right. And Karen's just smiling. I wish you could see she's laughing. Outdoors, the only thing that actually matters, 2 things, sound and your internet connection. So 2 ways of dealing with that. If you happen to be in a great spot where you have all the Gs, the 5Gs, etc., happy days on a roving iPad, but that thing can drop out. But what about the audio? If you don't have that fuzzy looking thing over your microphone, that dead cat, so to speak, and I think I'm going to throw it to Karen because they know a lot more about audio than I do. But that's the main thing. Yes, you can do all the multiple cameras. I've seen some amazing work done from some brilliant presenters outdoors, but people will handle picture being dodgy audio, you'll hear about it. Karen, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, thanks, Ben. I will. And if you do look at the Web Conferencing 101 sessions, I think we've got an excerpt of Stephen Bancroft's information about some of the sound and things you can do for outdoor audio. What you can also factor in is maybe pre-recording some of your outdoor pieces. Now, the advantage of that, you don't have weather constraints. So, you know, if you've got a date booked in, actually it's pouring down, raining, or it's really windy, you're going to have to cancel. So if you pick a really nice, lovely sunny day, pre-record little elements of what you want to do outdoors and then integrate them into a live session. Then you can still have the dynamic aspect, even if you don't use your audio for your videos and you can do it as a voiceover. That can actually be a really useful way that your pre-recorded footage is a bit more dynamic because you're doing the voiceover at the time, and that means it can change a little bit each time depending on questions that you may have had. Otherwise, do them as small set little vignettes that you can then use at different times. It'll give you a lot more flexibility, and that just means that if you have weather issues outside and seasonally issues and those kinds of things, that you're a little bit covered. So that can be a way to do some of your outdoor programs. But if you give it a go, get some of your audio. We did some work with Sydney Olympic Park, and they were using an iPad with a great speaker with a great headset. We had a staff member that was also helping follow on the chat, and they were doing those programs out in the wonderful mangrove environments at Sydney Olympic Park. We were lucky to have great weather, and they had a strong enough sort of Wi-Fi signal that was working really well. So there can be some real issues, but if you can get some of your technology right and you've got great conditions outside at the time, it's worth giving it a try. And backup would be your videos. Thanks for that one. Jackie?
Thank you, Karen. Aj has a question for you. If you were to broaden 3 main areas of environmental science projects, what would they be? And what would be the most engaging for mixed audience like mums and kids?
Okay, so I've been doing a whole series in the last few months of sort of what's in your backyard. So I've done spiders, frogs, mini beasts, and a lot of these have been with that family audience. So essentially kids working from home during school holidays, but a lot of the time the parents are present. They might not always be on camera, but they're there. So I do a lot of, making sure an adult knows when you're going outside doing exploring, because we're thinking about the child's safety on the digital environment. We've also got to think of the physical safety if we're giving any people information on what to do next, that we're making sure that we do say, well, don't go collecting on your own, don't go in rivers and creeks and all of those kinds of things that you want to make sure. So the adult interactions are really useful because there's lots of things that they need to do as a family unit. So to engage the parents as well can be really useful. And I often will hear a parent, laughing at one of my jokes in the background when they're just off camera. So hopefully you can do a little bit that's engaging for that, that broad spectrum audience. So again, it's just having a little think if you are doing things for family groups and you need to engage both the children and the adults in the activities, and you make fun with that. It's like, you guys can go out and do this exploration or this workshop or idea or follow up together, make it a full family project. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, Karen. We've just got one more question, and I'm anticipating that Ben might want to answer this one. Julie Ann asks, what's the best app for polling audiences? For example, she's thinking about having the audience vote for their favorite science presenter as part of an event. What would you use?
Yeah, no worries. There's a lot out there. Poll Everywhere was one I used to go to a lot when polling wasn't integrated into web conferencing. There are other ones around, but Poll Everywhere plays nice. There are ones that are free and with some that are paid, and et cetera, but totally you could use that. You could also use quiz-based things, Kahoot quizzes. There's a couple of them around, all of different pay amounts. But, a lot of the web conferencing platforms have woken up to that polling is a thing, especially from a webinar point of view. So you might be able to do that. The only issue can be is that you kind of have to pre-guess what they're going to ask, what they're going to say, and you have to put the multi-answer situation in. But yeah, I hope that sort of helps. Anyone else in the panel? I mean, this is actually, I'm going to take the danger. This is not how you do this. But anyone on the panel, without directing to anyone, want to add to this? And we'll count the silence, or maybe we'll go for it.
Well, I think for Julianne's case specifically, you should know your science presenters already, right, as part of the event. So running a poll within, for example, Zoom webinar would be really simple, and you wouldn't need to go to another app or website to do that. And you can pre-prepare that poll within your Zoom account for that webinar. Or you can write one out on the fly if you like. Just so we can, I guess, have a look at polling, I can quickly run one now so you can have a look. Here's one that we ran last week that's just popped up. A pre-written question with a bunch of pre-written options. And for anyone interested, feel free to have a vote. This is a multiple choice question, which means you can actually select more than one before hitting submit. And while you can't see the stats live, all of the panelists should be able to, or hosts and co-hosts. Adele had wondered whether it could be prepared in Zoom beforehand. Yep, it can. There are limitations though. You can only run 10 polls per webinar. Each poll can have multiple questions, but only 10 max. If you can't see the poll, that's because you might be joining in on the web browser. So either Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, if anyone uses that. You have to come in through the Zoom app to be able to see the poll. So I can now end the poll and I can click share results. So everyone should be able to see everyone else's options, and the statistics show up right away. Back to you, Ben.
I feel sorry that the comments about a couple of those desktop browser platforms just that popped up in the chat. It's quite funny. Anyway, so no, that's yeah. Look, there's lots of ways of engaging absolutely with this. Right back to the start. Just try something, fail, try something again until it works. It's probably the best way I could say. It's just there's no formula for this beyond just being a little bit. Just go for it. You'll be fine. I think you'll actually be okay. Expect something to go wrong, but your public won't totally get into you after it. They'll understand, especially now, because honestly, they're the ones that are coming to grips with this too. Everyone's now in this same boat. I honestly think now that this digital conferencing thing is the great unifier right across this country, because everyone now has to talk to one of these things, for at least for a little while. Cool. Anything else to turn up in the Q&A?
We have actually finished all the questions in Q&A. And it's 3 minutes to 3.
Perfect. So there's our additional timing. So righto. So in case you're wondering, we have a completely different series of things coming up. It's the first one that kicks off on this Thursday. We are looking at how we all get to work together as organisations in all our different ways we've seen it work before, and potentially challenge everyone to get involved as of now, pretty much do the same thing. We're looking at collaboration, so please keep an eye out on your email. The links for that are there. In fact, if you look in your past emails, that link will be there to join in too. Please feel free to join in. And by the way, I wanted to thank all of our panelists. So Bridget Murphy from ANSTO, thank you very much. Heather Catchpole from Refraction Media. We have Karen Player from Sydney Science Education. We have Gary Westmore. Sorry, I heard that. Thanks, Ben, at the same time. Yeah, Gary Westmore from ACME, Australia Centre for Moving Image. We had the Fizzics Education team, Jackie Cow and Stephanie Ruiz, for making this all happen in the background. And honestly, your moderators are your friends. And thank you for hanging around for everyone. And I hope to catch you another time. Thank you for Inspiring Australia and New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer. So many thank yous, and we'll catch you another time.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Thank you for joining us for the Virtual Excursions training, supported by Inspiring Australia. You can find more information and top tips on the Virtual Excursions Australia website.